A mysterious island, a fight to the death, and nothing left to show for it but your life as the prize? We're not talking about Blackout, Firestorm, DayZ, Rings of Elysium, Realm Royale, Fortnite, PUBG, or Apex Legends. This is Battle Royale. Battle Royale is an action horror film from the year 2000 directed by Kinji Fukasaku. The screenplay was written by his son, Kinta Fukasaku. It's based off of Kushin Takami's novel of the same name. So the premise of Battle Royale finds the country of Japan in economic collapse, and the youth are taking over and they're causing a lot of problems for the country. So the Japanese government gets together, they decide to enact the Battle Royale Act. So the way that the Battle Royale Act works is they pick a class of students at random, they drop them onto an island, and they force them to kill each other until one student is left. They do this for a couple reasons. One is to thin the herd, get rid of some of these troublemaking kids from their country. And the second reason is to try to get the students of the country to stop causing trouble. At least that's how I interpret it, because the reasoning behind the BR Act is a little foggy and never really explained. So as you guys know, when I talk about movies, I talk about the good, the bad, and then I give you my score. That being said, let's start with the good. So Battle Royale has a banger introduction. Anyone that has seen it will recognize it straight away because it plays Verdi's Requiem, and it's accompanied by a bunch of waves crashing onto the rocks of a mysterious island. It then cuts to a bunch of reporters clashing with Jazdaff troops because they're trying to speak to a student. And this student is dirty, covered in blood, and just looks demented. And that's your intro. It's really chaotic. It's hard to understand what's going on. They do give you some title cards that explain what the Battle Royale Act is and what they're doing. But still, it leaves you kind of wondering what the hell is going on. And that speaks to the movie itself, because this movie, to me, is all about chaos, so it's a perfect introduction for this film. What I love about the beginning of this movie, right past the intro, is they show you a bunch of the different students. They show you some flashbacks, and they show you who they are currently. And it shows that not all of the students are bad. Some of them are good, but that doesn't matter because they're all getting thrown into the mix with this BR Act. I know it made me feel a little shitty the first time I saw the movie in the year 2000, but it really makes me feel shitty now because, I've had kids. I see how troubled youth can be. I myself wasn't a perfect kid, but I turned out okay with the help of people. And these kids aren't getting that. They're just getting thrown onto an island and being forced to kill each other. And it also makes me think about the parents. The parents of these good kids. They've done their job. They've made this kid a good person, and yet that kid's still taken by the Japanese government, put onto this island against the parents' wishes, most likely, and forced to kill somebody or get killed. That's pretty messed up. And they introduce you to all this stuff and make you feel all these things just in the first few minutes. So from the start to the finish, this movie is all go and no slow. When everything kicks off with these students, it's very disorienting for them, and it's disorienting for the viewer as well. And I think that's important. You feel like you're kind of thrown into the class with them. And even though the introduction explained what the Battle Royale Act is, you're sitting there confused just like the kids and wondering what's going on, what's going to happen to them, what the rules are, and everything else. And that's where their former teacher comes into play. Not only does he come in, get the students in line, and explain to them what's going on, you also see that he was their teacher when they were in 7th grade, and they did some pretty messed up stuff to him. So it gives you an understanding of where he's coming from as well. Of course, that was in 7th grade, and these kids are now freshmen. And that's the thing, all of the classes chosen to participate in the BR Act are 9th grade classes, they're freshman classes. And the teacher is played brilliantly by Beat Takeshi. You guys will know Beat Takeshi from tons and tons of amazingly funny YouTube videos, whether they be game shows or hidden camera things. He's in a lot of them, and that's because he's a brilliant comedian. But on the flip side of that coin, he also is one of my favorite actors for playing a hard man, for playing a killer, for playing an assassin, or any type of a shady character. He's just super good at it. But in this movie, he plays kind of the straight man. He's the dean to all of the kids, Jerry. His introduction and the way that he interacts with the students and some of the stuff that he does to the kids makes you know right away that you're in for a hell of a ride and that this is one of the most gangster-ass movies you're ever going to watch. And then you, as the viewer, and the kids finally get to know what the actual rules are for Battle Royale. So there's 40 plus students. They have 3 days to kill each other until the last student is left. And that last student gets to go home and live. That's the prize. That's all you get. They're all given a bag with some supplies and a random weapon. They're then cast out onto the island, and it's every person for themselves. If this sounds familiar to many of you gamers, it's because this is the exact premise of PUBG, because Brendan Green, aka PlayerUnknown, ripped that off completely from the movie. Every aspect of PUBG comes from Battle Royale. And that's why when PUBG tried to sue Epic, they finally gave up, because they couldn't prove that the Battle Royale idea was their own, because Brendan Green ripped it off from the actual movie called Battle Royale. But going back to the explanation of the rules, it's done in such a super Japanese way. I lived in Japan for about 3.5 years, and I used to watch their TV all the time. So the lady who's giving out the rules to the competition is super cute and funny, and she's got kind of a little girly voice. So she's talking about these deadly serious things, but she's doing all the funny little poses and the girly voice and everything else. So it's almost like she doesn't take it serious, and she probably doesn't because she's just some actress. It's pretty surreal, and it almost feels fake, and that's why a lot of the kids are really shocked, and they're wondering, like, is this real? Is this legit? Do I have to do this? And of course, they find out soon enough they have to do this. And in the process of doing all this crazy stuff for the movie, a lot of these kids turn in some brilliant performances. Whether they be stoic and brooding, or sad and emotional, or full-on psychotic, they really hit it home, man. They knock it out of the park, and you believe that these kids are what they are portraying. And you really get to know a lot of these kids' characters through really small actions that they do, whether it be during the rule explanation or even when they're just going up to get their bag with their random gear and weapons. You really start to see who the different students are and how they might act during this hunt. And that's why so many of them went on to be big stars. They also fill in a lot of who these characters are with really effective backstories. There's quite a few flashbacks in the film, and even a dream sequence that really lets you know who these kids are, what they're about, and why they're doing things the way that they're doing them in the middle of this hunt. Since this movie came out, there have been countless rip-offs of the same format. A bunch of people put onto islands, and they are having to kill each other. Oh, they're prisoners this time instead. They're not students. Oh, and this time the explosive is on their ankle or whatever. There's been a ton of them, and almost none of them bother with backstories or flashbacks. And if they do, they're really minimal, and they're done pretty poorly. So Battle Royale is the OG, and it really does everything the best. There is a reason that in 2010 or so, Quentin Tarantino called this one of the best movies made in the last 20 years, and the movie that he wished he made. The cinematography in this film can be pretty effective at times. Not all the time, but there are a lot of great shots. And I really love the use of the zoom. They use the zoom a lot in this movie, and it's to show a couple things. Sometimes it's to show the perspective of a certain person, and sometimes it's just to show the scale of this island. They also show a lot of these really wide shots where the kids look really small, almost like insects that are easily stamped out and no one would care. And that's kind of the situation they're in. They're in deep shit, and they're so small, they can't really do anything about it except for what's right in front of them, which is kill the other kids on the island so that they can live. And speaking of the kills, there are some awesome kills in this movie. Great blood effects, the very Japanese blood effects where somebody gets cut with a knife and all the blood just goes spraying everywhere. It's super exaggerated, and it's super awesome. But not all the kids want to kill. Some of them group together. They form these really tight bonds. They team up. They're just trying to survive and trying to be good kids. They might not have been good kids before. They might have had problems at school, but now they're realizing what's going on, what their situation is, and they want to do the right thing. But sadly, it's too late. They're going to have to do one thing or another, because all of the kids who are on this island also have this collar strapped to their neck. And if they don't kill, or if they're in certain places on the island, they blow up these collars and it kills the kid. So no matter what, they're going to be forced to kill eventually, and that's pretty messed up. This is one of my favorite films when it comes to the use of classical music as the score. And we're talking famous pieces, and they're used in ways that you wouldn't expect. They go with death scenes, and they go with moments of chaos. They go with these weird announcements that the teacher makes every so often during the day. It reminds me of Old Boy, just great classical pieces used with these really dark images. There's a lot of great little subplots and side stories that happen during the movie, and that's good, because if they didn't have those, which they are done really well, the movie would just be a bunch of kids killing each other, and people wouldn't get invested in it. They wouldn't care. They wouldn't care about the kids. It'd be just a bunch of nameless kids murdering each other. While that might be fun to watch for a little bit, it would get old. but they add these complex layers and make it something more. But even though you do have a lot of good kids on the island trying to do the right thing, not all of these kids are good. There are some straight up little badass psychos here that are doing a lot of killing, and they really deserve to be killed themselves. It's almost like Joffrey in the Purple Wedding. You remember when you watched Game of Thrones during the Purple Wedding, how excited you were. You loved it. And that's how it is with these kids in this movie. Okay, it's not quite that intense because, you had a bunch of seasons to get to know Joffrey and see how much of a horrible kid he was. This one, you have a couple hours, but still, it's kind of up there. There are some nice twists in this movie, stuff you wouldn't expect. And there are some other things that happen that are a little bit expected, but they do it kind of in a different way, so they pull that off too. It has a pretty Japanese ending too. A lot of people really love it, and a lot of people really, really hate it. I don't mind it. I'm kind of on the fence. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's bad. It's kind of just there. I mean, really, it would be pretty hard to close out this story, but they do it in a cool way that leaves an opening for a sequel. But it doesn't feel like a cash cow or sequel bait or whatever. And the thing is, it did get a sequel, but unfortunately, the director died after they shot the first scene of the sequel. So his son took over, and his son wasn't exactly a seasoned director. I haven't seen it, but every friend that I have who is into film that ever saw it said, it was pretty shit. It was underwhelming, and it couldn't compare at all to this film. And of course it couldn't. Any type of film like this that's tried since then doesn't compare. But trying to follow this up with a sequel would be really hard, especially when the director who made the first one, who had this distinct vision, died while making the second one. And that's because when he made this one, when he made Battle Royale, he was 70 years old. And that's pretty trippy because if you watch this movie, it's full of like this youthful angst and energy and everything else. So this 70-year-old guy was able to translate that even though he's at that age. But that's it for the good. Let's get to the bad. And while I do love a lot of the gore effects because many of them are pulled off so well, there are a couple that are very obvious in their execution. At one point, somebody gets stabbed in the head, but when they show the person pulling out the knife, it's in their cheek. So the script supervisor, the actors, everybody on set didn't catch that, and that's pretty bad. There's one scene where somebody has a blade to their throat, and when their throat gets cut, all this blood goes flying out everywhere, but you clearly see that there's a gap between the blade and their throat. So there's no contact made, and yet the blood's flying everywhere. It's kind of distracting, and it takes you out of that moment. And one of the things that you'll notice too in this movie is CGI blood. When this movie came out, CGI blood was in its infancy, and it really shows. It doesn't age well at all. There are a couple scenes where it comes off pretty good. You still know what it is. You still see it, and you're like, oh, that's fake. That's digital. And there's other scenes where it's so obvious it's just CGI blood. You don't see any actual wounds. It's just done so badly. About halfway through the movie, during a really pivotal scene between two important characters, they switch camera angles, and the color grade changes completely. It goes from this like weird blue tone to kind of a bright yellow, and it's really jarring and it really stands out. It's really going to distract any people who watch a lot of movies. It's going to distract filmmakers and editors a lot. And like that scene, a lot of this movie's pieces don't really gel together too well. They'll cut from one situation that's really tense or whatever to another that's kind of happy. And these tonal shifts are so massive to where it'll take you out of the movie a lot of times. You'll be like, whoa, what the hell's going on now? And while many of these kids put in some kick-ass performances, there are some other kids, their performances weren't that good. Now, most of them didn't have that big a role, and that's probably why, but they still stand out quite a bit. There's one character who goes around the island. He has a pretty good weapon, and he's just shooting like this. He never tries to aim at anything. He's shooting like a straight-up stormtrooper, and sometimes when he is really kind of looking at the person and he's aiming or whatever, he's still missing by a mile, which is very convenient. It's plot armor, and that's kind of annoying because for the most part, that doesn't happen in this film. Some people I've talked to who've seen this movie felt like it was way overacted, and I can see where they're coming from, but at the same time, you have the cultural differences between what Japan watches and how they feel about certain things. And then you got to remember that we're talking about teenagers, so their emotions are going to be all over the place. So it makes sense that one scene somebody's maybe screaming and crying and just in hysterics, and another one of them is just going psycho and killing a bunch of people and yelling about different things. And in other scenes, people are just arguing and fighting, and it seems for like the dumbest reasons, and it is. But again, they're kids, so of course they're going to fight over dumb shit. During some of the scenes in the movie, they'll show these different students, whether they're alive or dead, and these quotes will pop up on screen, and they're in kanji and then subtitled in English. And oftentimes I was sitting there wondering, why is that there? When did they say that? What does that have to do with them as a character? or how they just died or what they just did. And I know this is kind of nitpicky, but at one point in the movie, there's this important character who's been running around with this 12-gauge tactical shotgun, and every time he's killed someone or had to fight or whatever, he's racked the shell shot. And at this point, he kills this other kid, and he pulls the trigger 3 times, and he never racks it. It's very distracting. It's almost like if you watch a movie and somebody keeps shooting and shooting and shooting, like at the end of Thor Ragnarok, where the guy's shooting the 2 M16s and he never reloads. It's the same thing. Now, this last one's not really a nitpick. It's pretty legitimate. There's a lot of digital zooms in the movie. Instead of keeping that one wide shot that they did, they zoom in with artificial zooms, and it just makes the picture look pixelated and blurry. You know, it's a soft focus. It's ugly. So I'm not sure why they didn't just keep that original frame. Okay, you might not have had as much of an emotional impact that you were trying to go for, but at the same time, you're not getting that same emotional impact because people are looking at this zoom like, damn, that looks ugly. And they're not thinking about what this teacher or what the student is doing or thinking. But that's really all I had to say about the good and the bad for Battle Royale. For a long time, this movie couldn't get like a wide DVD release because Toei was really worried about what would happen, the controversies that it would stir up, because in Japan, it made a big stink. For like 2 years, there was all this controversy that revolved around this film. But I think that speaks to how genre defining and defying that it was. It really changed things, and it influenced people like Quentin Tarantino. The movie's that good. But it's not perfect. That being said, what is my score? Drum roll, please. 8 out of 10.